Welcome to the Belly Dance Stories podcast, a multimedia production directed by Alexandra Molina and Valerie Molinari.
You will hear inspiring conversations and learn about the ways belly dance has become a powerful channel of transformation in people's lives.
Okay, we're recording. So welcome everybody to the Belly Dance Stories podcast. Today we have Jesenia. Jesenia is an artist based out of Jacksonville, Florida. She began her dance journey at a very early age, learning and dancing Puerto Rican folk dances. Jesenia has a Bachelor of Fine Art from the University of Florida with a focus on interdisciplinary art. Her interests were and still are in exploring the idea of cultural identity in the US, Arab and African diaspora, and the trials and tribulations of womanhood. Her work is drawn from her own experiences with love, loss, culture, and healing to tell the story of self-acceptance and actualization. Welcome, Jesenia!
Hey!
Thank you so much for being on our podcast. Valerie and I and our listeners are really excited to have you.
I'm excited.
We wanted to ask you, what is your belly dance story and what should our audience know about you?
So I began learning how to dance Middle Eastern dances around like 8 years old. And I didn't have the approach or resources that a lot of dancers have where like they go to a class and have like a formal teacher. I learned directly through my mom. She was a dancer and she's the one who first taught me like the basics of it. And then as I started to progress, I started to seek out more information because she didn't have a vast vocabulary within Middle Eastern dancing technique. And it was getting to a point where I was passing what she knew. So as I started to get older, I started to seek out information on my own and, attending festivals. And I didn't attend my first festival until I was 19 years old. I was already well into college and because I didn't have a lot of money. So my parents couldn't really afford to sign me up into dance classes either. So when it came to my first dance festival, I didn't have any money. But a little shout out here to Anais. She actually let me attend the festival for free for my first festival and also allowed me to compete for free, which was my first competition too. And I had gotten second place, my first time for everything. And I got second place. And that was a huge jumping start to me, like really diving in and learning and seeking out more knowledge and networking and meeting other dancers. Because I didn't even know any dancers up until that point. I was just like in my own little bubble going on. And ever since then, it's just been growth from there.
What an inspiring story, Jesenia. Very beautiful. So dance kind of like came to you in a very natural setting, which I think it's very easy to perceive in your dancing. And we wanted to jump back and attach that you're saying about your background to your performance at Belly Dance Stories. You had a very interesting text and audio that we're going to play right now for our audience to listen to it. Are we ready, Alex? Okay.
Yes.
So this is the audio that opened Jesenia's performance in the last Belly Dance Stories production, volume 2. It's very interesting. We're going to play it.
When I was 11 years old, my friend said to me, "My mom said we can't be friends because Puerto Rican women steal our men." Confused, I remember thinking, I'm a kid. What do I need a man for? Is my friendship damned because I'm Puerto Rican? That day I told my mom what happened and learned about all the stereotypes. Puerto Rican women are overly fertile, sexual, dumb, and crazy. As a first-generation Latina, there was a responsibility to be impeccable and reject some aspects of culture. As I grew, the fantasy about being unhinged and disrupting the world around me brought peace. Then it became my reality. I became everything that my family wanted from me and what the world expected of me, existing somewhere between restraint and hedonism. And I love it.
I love that audio. I think it's a beautiful text that takes the audience also through a journey. I love the poetic voice because it really starts in a very colloquial way. It feels almost like you're having a conversation with somebody. But there's also some changes in the tone of that voice that kind of like takes you in a journey, I feel, in the beginning of like that perception of a kid, and then how through the sentences it matures basically to your experience as a woman nowadays. Okay, so I want to talk to you about how was that writing process, and how do you felt also with the reaction of the audience? Because at the beginning of the test, if I don't remember wrong, people start laughing when you say, I'm a kid, why do I need a man for it? You know? And I thought that it was a testament also of the attention the audience is giving to you at that moment. So tell us a little bit about that text.
Okay, so when I was starting the writing process, this is an idea that I actually had years ago, and it's evolved over time as I keep thinking about it and keep adding on to it, keep removing things out of it. So I had a base already developed of what I wanted it to say and it to be about. It draws directly from quotations from things that were already actually said to me, made it a lot easier because this was a true story. This actually did happen to me. And so I already had this base. I had to condense it down to 30 seconds. And I had written 5 different versions of this, and they were going on forever. And I would start rambling because I get onto a topic and I'll be like, and this, and that, and this, and that, because I start to get passionate about it, and I start going, just never ends. And then I was like, I don't know how I'm going to condense this. So I sent a version to you guys, and I was like, look, this is going to get adjusted again because I had set up a meeting with a friend of mine, and she's an excellent writer. She's really good at writing. She knows more than one language, so she's really good at dictating and telling stories through words and having things make sense. She's also a political science major, so she understands how to bring apart topics and make it easily digest for some people. And so I took her out for some hookah and coffee, and I read to her what I wrote, and then I said it in the way that I was planning on saying it. And then she was like, can you give me your notepad? And she started tweaking things around, moving things around. And then she told me, okay, what are the topics you want to say? And I was like, I want to talk about the story that I have, but I also want to include the dynamics of being first generation and being a woman, and how this one topic is multi-layered. It's not just one thing, but I need to make it fit in 30 seconds. And so we just sat and we came up with different ways, touched up different things, and went back and forth for 3 hours. And then that's when I had the final product, and I sent it over to you guys. And that's how that writing portion went. When it came to practicing how I was dictating and emphasizing different things that are said, I practice at home, and I would emphasize different areas of it, different pauses, different phrases, different tones, different straining, different in that idea, and working like how I work my face, my facial structures attached to that. And I would practice different things along that to really invoke that emotion so that people can, they can hear my voice, but I want them to envision a person saying it too with the facial expression and everything, because language and communication, majority of it is through body language. And if you're removing that portion out of it and just having a voice recording, you have to talk in a way that a person can envision the body language that will be attached to it. So that was my main focus there, and having it develop with that. And then sitting with you, you were helping me too, because you said, actually, when you say that part about like, I'm a kid, like make it sound more innocent. Because it is true. You are a kid, you are innocent. And this idea of projecting sexuality onto a kid, and this idea of kids desire men just because they are a certain ethnicity is beyond me. And this idea that a grown adult was teaching their kid that themselves.
And that it's the how outrageous also stereotypes can be, that you have to experience it at that level at such a young age. I think also that one of the challenges that we have in the Belly Dance Stories production is precisely to condense those stories. But something very powerful also happens in that process, and is that the text becomes so juicy that it doesn't really matter about the length, because then the concept and the idea, it's so well put together that the audience can really go into a deep reflection and understand the message, I feel like, in a deeper way.
I also think that it's so what the points that you were talking about, how you had to embody the text, but also the other emotions that were coming out of the text is very important, so that the audience starts to gauge who's coming. And it's another way of entering the stage. And I think your piece was the most popular piece of volume 2. Everybody kept talking about your piece. And part of it was because you had such a storyline within your audio. I think that's how people began to be engaged. And you just got it. You and I think in addition to, you worked with someone else to help you with that text. So the collaboration really, I think, helps, because we end up having to empower that idea even further because we have other people helping us with what we're trying to say. So your example is so beautiful and powerful.
Something I do want to say for anyone who's listening and like future people who are approaching belly dance stories is, you don't want, it's like because in the art world, in the visual art world, we have this thing called an artist statement. And the artist statement is not a bio, and you're not telling what your art is about, because you never want to tell the viewer, this is what this means, this is what this means, this is what that means. Your artist statement is supposed to be to give an idea and kind of guide people into what your overall approach to your art is going to be about. So when they do see it, they already have an idea created as to what it might be about, and then use that as clues to how to critique and interpret what they're viewing. And when you're creating your audio, you kind of have to like think of that in the same way. You don't want to tell your audience, hey, like this is about this and this and that. No, you want to tell your statement of what your art is generally about, but not tell them you have to interpret it specifically in this way. Just guide them.
Perfect. So well said. Thank you. And so let's segue into the next question. We want to talk about identity and cultural labels, specifically the American and Puerto Rican in your case. We're still on the topic of your text, and after becoming aware of your quote label, have you found that they define you? Do you define them? Where are the boundaries, if there are any?
I define my labels. Growing up, there was like this. I wasn't even aware of the labels at first. I moved around a lot growing up. I lived in Sicily. I lived in many different places, and a lot of the times, the only people I was really interacting with was my own family, because we never stayed in a place long enough to really develop those deep, long-lasting relationships and friendships. So my idea of my culture and who I am directly stemmed from just the people I'm around. It wasn't connected to a specific physical place, but an idea. And like food and music and those sort of things versus like a physical land. And when I moved back to the States, that's when I got taught the very hard lesson that these labels exist in America. And how when I go to Puerto Rico, I'm not Puerto Rican. And when I'm in America, I'm not American. And you just kind of have like this somewhere in between where you don't really fit in to either. Because I would go up to the other Latinas in my school and they would shun me out. Like I wasn't accepted with them. I wasn't accepted with white people. I wasn't really accepted fully into anything. So I kind of just wandered around and just had like maybe my one or two close friends, but I never belonged to like a group that had a specific identity that said, this is my identity. So in some ways, it did allow me to explore and figure that out on my own. And it was much easier for me to have a grasp of being Puerto Rican and identifying that than it was being American, because my American identity is kind of I don't want to say it's muggy, it's dirty. Like I don't have the best idea of America in general, because when I moved here immediately, my parents were being told that they weren't allowed to speak Spanish. We're told that my mom was told she has cotton picking feet. Like racial slurs were already like thrown out at us from all directions. It wasn't just from white people. It was also from the African American community. It was from other ethnic communities. It wasn't just a specific one group thing. It came from everywhere. And then it's something that really does happen. I feel more so in like the South, like Alabama, Jacksonville, Pensacola, like the dirty South, because in some ways, a lot of different ethnicities are competing to be more associated with whiteness. So they're going to put down other ethnicities to give themselves a leg up. Like, oh no, I'm not like that group because we're like this. Oh no, I'm not like that group because we're like this. So there comes a time where it seems like everyone's kind of like not for each other because they're just trying to get accepted by this other group. And growing up kind of in that environment felt kind of isolating. So it was harder for me to navigate what it means to be American. Because I feel like I can't fully call myself Puerto Rican. I wasn't born there. I didn't grow up there. My entire identity of being Puerto Rican is directly stemmed specifically from family. I spent more of my time in the States. So where do I consider myself American? Where do I consider myself Puerto Rican? It's still an evolving thing. I'm still trying to in some ways figure that out. But at the end of the day, what I've decided is I am a combination of every culture I have interacted with. Like, I've spent my formative years in other countries up until I was 8 years old. As a young kid, you're absorbing that in, and you're just taking it in because you don't have any concept of that's not me, that's them. When you're a kid, you're just, I like it, I'm doing it, that's me. And then when you start to get older and they're like, actually, you can't do that because that belongs to them. I was like, but I literally grew up with that. How can you, like, it wasn't like something I saw a video and like, oh, I just like to do it. Like, no, like I grew up with it. I was in that with those people. I was with that group. I absorbed that as part of me. And I am the one who I decide what I am. And I am Puerto Rican. I know I am. I have the same struggles that they have. Most of my family is still there. I don't speak much Spanish, but I have my own connections. Like, when I go back to the island, I feel calmer. Like, it's like a different, I don't know how to describe it, but like when you're not, like, I don't feel like I belong to this land in a way. Like, I don't really feel like I belong to that land, but I belong to that culture, and to be around people who are the same as me and have a lot of similarities makes it feel comforting and like at home. I don't know. I don't know if that makes kind of.
I wanna just comment in the racial differences and the way that you are presenting it, because I went through very similar type of reactions when I moved here from the island, because of course I was born and raised in Puerto Rico. But then when I came back here, I noticed that I was the Latina, the Caribbean girl, and constantly that was thrown to me as a way to define me. But I like the way you're mentioning, like, all this culture fluidity that it's going on also over the world in general, and how we cannot have like a homogeneous perception of cultures too. Alex, something that you want to add?
Yes, I think that what is sparking me right now is how more and more we're hearing, oh, I'm not from here, but I'm not either from here. I'm not from here either. Because I have similar, in a way, a similar situation where I'm first generation American, but I have Latina roots, Costa Rica and Cuba. But I don't feel I'm 100% one or the other. But more and more, we hear this conversation happening, whether it's in Miami or some other places. But I think that it's exciting for me to hear about how we continue to evolve as humans in general from thousands of years, and continue to be truthful to what we like, what this person likes from whatever these experiences are. So the way that our experiences and our backgrounds and our roots begin to help us define what we like and how we continue to stand up for our own truth and our own experiences is something that really interests me. And I think that belly dance has many open doors for us to do that. And could you talk a little bit more about why you're choosing belly dance to have this conversation?
Yeah, belly dance resonates with my soul. I don't know how to describe it because it's something that just came to me so young. I wouldn't even say specifically it's belly dance. the ability, I feel it's the sensuality behind it. Because I'm naturally a very sensual person. Like I love the senses, I love music, I love the way things feel, I love the way things taste. I am a very of the senses person. And out of all the dances, I feel belly dance is the most sensual dance of like letting the music seep into you and deep into your bones and just having it like marinate there, like that feeling of belly dance for me feels like I'm putting on a warm blanket on a cold day. Like it's so comforting and so like it feels like I could touch it in a way, even though you can't. And because of that, it's much easier for me to speak through belly dance because I'm a very expressive person. I talk a lot with my hands. I talk a lot with my body. So to be able to have that ability to really work my body in that kind of way while still maintaining a quietness and softness behind it, it's the most accurate way for me to dance. For it to be if I speak, what would it be? And I feel like it would be belly dance because belly dance there's no one way to do it. So there's no one way to talk. There's no one way to say one specific phrase. And I love the diversity and variety you can get within this one dance.
I love the way you describe the dance. And I do think, and I agree with you, that it's a dance that is easier to personalize rather than other disciplines that, for me, with other dance forms, I started with ballet, right? So they're very obsessed with the structure and to do a certain vocabulary of movements. But in belly dance, I really think that some of the movements are always coming back to us, like that motion of coming in and movement that definitely feel more intimate. I feel has an effect on making us feel more comfortable, kind of like journaling with our bodies through the movements.
We hope you're enjoying the conversation so far.
We want to thank our sponsors, Heart Hips Mind by Sarah Chan, Kathy Lamis Martin, HGAB Studios, and Andrej Gottlich.
Now let's get back to the conversation.
I love the character of your performance also for Belly and Stories. You also had a very interesting cross of dances in your dancing. Tell us a little bit about that.
So I created my look so the music that I had, the song was the title was I'm Not Sorry. Mm-hmm. And inspired by the Madonna song for that, I'm not sorry, it's human nature, when she talks about like having her sexual freedom and not being shamed for it. So I was inspired by that song for the title. And the actual music that I was dancing to was called The Snake, and then the second song was Eye of the Snake. And throughout history in the Western world, in Western civilization, snakes are symbolism is usually something bad, evil, mischievous, sinister, untruthful. Like the snakes always had a negative connotation, but in Eastern symbolism and even in Eastern medicine, snakes are a positive thing. They're a symbol of rebirth, of healing, of fertility. And this idea, like, in it started to make me think of like the dualities of being a woman. On top of that, how even within art, women are either depicted as being seductress or bad and evil, and then also depicted as mothers and as healers and goddesses, and how we both things are constantly have like these dualities. And then for my character, I was thinking of like the Chonga and how even that person has their dualities of being told like how many times you grow up and in the States and being like, oh, don't be a Chonga, oh, Chonga, like it's like you're being called ghetto. But at the same time, these women were also considered to be like sexually free or promiscuous, even though they weren't. It's just the way they dressed. And how even now, like that fashion is now considered cool when back then it was considered trash. And that whole idea. And then I thought, you know, when I'm creating this character, I want her to be a goddess in a way, but like a warrior at the same time. And how I can bring this stereotype and caricature of a Chonga and also make her into a goddess, because it's like throughout like Greek stories and mythology, gods and goddesses will come down and you wouldn't even know that they're gods or goddesses. You would just think they're a regular person on the street. And like, what if their Chonga was a god or goddess? She was Lilith, or she was a fertility goddess amongst us, and we're just over here talking shit the entire time, like making fun of her. And I wanted that look to be present of like it kind of be ethereal, but also be satirical and comedic at the same time. And like I put the really long nails on because, and I wanted them to be bright orange, to be like poisonous. Like, is this person poisonous? But at the same time, snake venom has been used to heal and as medicine. You know, the dress was metal chains, so I want to look like scales, but also look like armor. Like you're about to go to war, like it's protective. And that was my whole approach of having these different images and symbolism to come together. Everything leads to another. I'm very big in like not just the music and the dancing, but if what I'm wearing matches it. And sometimes I go on stage and I'm not wearing an actual belly dance costume. I'm wearing regular clothes or just like something very simple, because when I'm listening to the music, I'm like something shiny and sparkly will be so distracting to it. And it distracts me. Like when I see some people perform, I'm like, the music is so beautiful, the dance was great, but the costume doesn't match what's happening. And I feel like there's a lot of disconnect there. Like you have to think of the whole package and the whole story you're telling, not just this one piece, and then throw on a pretty costume or throw on like sparkly jewelry or sparkle this if it doesn't really match what you're doing. And you have to be okay with not being beautiful all the time, because not everything has to be beautiful. Sometimes being a little rougher and not meticulous, there's beauty in that and rawness too, but it doesn't have to be glamorous every single time, and it shouldn't be glamorous every single time. There's a time and place for everything, and that includes the costuming and what you're choosing to wear.
And
yeah, I love that idea of sorry, Alex,
That's
of,
okay.
of redefining aesthetics also through costuming.
And so I'm trying to sum up so far what we've been kind of discussing about, quote quote, the definition of belly dance for you is that belly dance is very adaptable and you can personalize it to the message that we're trying to come across. So, and the costuming, that you're very big on the costuming and adding those elements to the storytelling. And also I wanted to add to that line of that string of ideas that you came to perform to a Miami audience where that whole concept, everything that you were talking about in your performance was very relatable. And I think that's one of the reasons why it was the most popular one, because people kept talking about it, like I said, and I feel like it was the audience that added to the understanding of your message. Did you think of your audience also, or was that something that...
I did think of my audience. And when you go into a performance, you should always be thinking about who your audience is going to be. Like anywhere, even if you're just dancing in a restaurant, you should always be thinking about your audience and who you're performing for, and incorporate that into it, because it also will include them into your performance indirectly. So that thought is always in the back of my head for every performance that I do. Anything, painting, which like it's a lot, because there's even some things like I don't think I would perform this for a mostly like European or white audience, because they wouldn't get it, and it will kind of turn into more of like I feel like I'm using this loosely because I don't really think it is like a freak show, like, oh my god, like this brown person's coming in telling a brown story, and they wouldn't really understand it and probably try to like debate it, be like, you're, kind of approach to it. So there is that element, like who you're performing for and how to tailoring your performances based on who it is.
Let's segue into your background as a visual artist and how it's informing your dance journey. And you were building a chair for this performance, and that was a part of your stage craft. So you were also thinking of accessories for your performance for the stage. And you built it. The dog ate it.
The dog ate it.
Literally. For real. But so my question is, how does your visual background inform your dance? And if you want to add the background of the story or the background of the chair, you can also add that to your response.
Yeah. So my visual art background really, really educates how I approach dance. I would say like a lot of the times it approaches it more so in the musicality realm. Because when I mostly have a focus on painting and the art theory of a painting that's not a painting. This idea of like if you create like a still and you could photograph it, it has the same composition and layers of idea of a painting with it not directly being a painting. And this idea of layers, and the music has those layers, right? You have like your bass, and then you have different layers that build up with that. And when I hear the music, I hear it in those layers. So like when you do a painting, you have your soft structure that you're having on your base. And normally you would start with your darks first, and you would do it like as a light. You wouldn't put it as thick. You'll have it be like a lighter tone. And as you build up to the foreground, you start adding your midtones and then your lights. And as you go up, the lighter the paint is, the thicker you want it to be. And that's how I like my dance to be. So I have like my dark bass, which is probably like the rhythms that are in that music. And then all the layers are kind of like the midtones and the highlights that I'm adding on top of that. So I view my body in that way. I view my hips in a way as my bass, like my rhythm. So I hold most of the rhythm in that region. So when I'm dancing, if I hear a downbeat, usually my hips are going down. I feel like that's where that juice of the bass and rhythm is. It's going to always exist in my hips, and usually horizontally for me versus vertically. I think of dance horizontal and vertical. based on my body type specifically, because I am wider in the hips. So I like to think of my dance existing in a horizontal plane versus a vertical plane. And then layering on top of that would be like my upper body undulation, my arms and how I hold them, in my shoulders, in my head, is everything added on top of that. So I approach my body like I'm building a painting along with the layers within the music. So that's like the big base of my approach with the visual art. Now, stage crafting, I did have a chair. And I was working with, I was building my chair. My chair was going to be like swervy, kind of like, and I wanted my body to take the shape with the chair as I lay on it. It would have been so dramatic. Like this goddess was just lounging on her chair, and the chair was going to have different things that were said to me, like, typical phrases like slut, whore, bitch, all the fun stuff. And I'm just lying on my bed of insults, perfectly unbothered and fine. And I was building it with plaster of Paris, which is like a gauze similar. If you ever had a cast, it's similar to what plaster of Paris is. And there's a period of time between it's wet and when it's hard, that it's soft. And if you have an anxiety-ridden dog, that if you leave the house and it's not caged up, he will get his teeth on anything that he can rip. And it was not dry enough to avoid being ripped, so he got a hold of it. And the most of it, the reason why I couldn't go through with it is because its structure, its integrity was damaged. And I did try to fix it, but it kept collapsing back in. I didn't have enough plaster of Paris to keep it sturdy enough anymore. So I had to scrap it out, throw it out. And it really sucks because I really wanted to have it there. But I don't know, maybe I'll re-record it and have a chair involved. We'll see.
That's a very interesting explanation about the way you visualize dance also in your body and music. Because I have several friends that are visual artists, including Alexandra Molina. And I have to say that I've found them that they are excellent dancers precisely because they know how image works.
What's so funny is I was talking to somebody else the other day about my process of choreographing, and it ties to our conversation here because we were talking about body language, and I was explaining that in my classes, long story short, I talk about body language and the movements, and they were asking me about where did I come up with these ideas. And I'm like, well, number one, I am also a very sensual person. I've always been, and able to express through my body. Two, I'm a figure painter. I paint people. I draw specifically people in movement. And so from my studies over time of people, gestures, movement, I've come to really learn how visually you can express through not just the 2D, the flat, the surface, but also 3D and 4D realm. And then that took me to also telling them about choreographing, that I also work in layers from almost like funneling. I work at that big base, or like a pyramid almost. And then as I go through the thin layers to a little bit thicker, I continue adding, and then it becomes juicier and juicier because now you're starting to really see those details. It's the same thing. And also with writing, anything that has to do with the creative arts, well, the arts in general, there's always that process, right? There's a process in everything. And we've all experienced it, even with dancing. I'm just particularly a more visual person instead of a more like conceptual. So I have to see and try things and continue to try and fail and try and fail and try until I get to where I want to be. But then we also need to be fearless in all that trial and error to finally get to where we want to be. So I really admire artists, creators who are in several art forms and working with several art forms. And Val, you're a writer, you're a poet. I think you kind of understand that as well, right?
Yeah. I mean, words, we use them in different ways to describe things, but it's with writing, it's the type of art form that you read, but then you as a person as the reader, you have to imagine things, and I guess the receivement is different in the body. You know what I'm saying? So with visual arts, I find it very interesting because you guys basically create something. And I do see that because you guys are basically working with forming, right? And just what you're saying, Alex, that you create people. You develop your eye also in a different way, which is a very important tool for a dancer, if not the most important one, which is like the vision, right? That's how we learn also when we are observing other dancers. But super interesting, the description of both of you. And yeah, I strongly believe that any type of crossover between art disciplines and genres will always enrich the artistic experience.
If I may add to the learning process, actually, it's not the eyes. The eyes will trick. Because I'm a visual person and I'm a tactile, most artists, visual painters, and any sort of, we actually use our hands to see. Our eyes are just the checking, like the person there, I imagine with the clipboard, okay, check mark, check mark. We actually have to physically feel what we're doing. And that helps us to see and visualize what the outcome will be. So when I teach, it's very tactile. Like the senses are the other senses, the hearing and the touch is more important than the eyes.
Interesting.
I feel when I paint and I'm sure, Jesenia, you feel when you create things, the hands are what you're connecting with, not your eyes.
Right. It is. And also, like, when I'm painting, like if I'm doing like a specific body position, instead of me looking at my reference image, I'll just try to emulate it and I'll start touching myself, like what's going on here with this bone and this muscle. Because like the reference image doesn't necessarily do it, but like you're like touching yourself, you're like, wait, I can actually feel like, okay, this is something, there's an intention here. Like I have to put like some type of shadow here. And it's like that with dance too. When I'm dancing and I'm going through the motions and I'm, practicing at home, I will like sit there and I will like also envision like if this song, if I'm trying to see, if this song to me reads as I'm tired, what happens when I'm tired? And I'll start like, okay, let me just slouch and just be heavy for a second. Like I don't have any energy. And I'll just start walking around and see how my feet are moving. Like, how are they heavy? Am I lifting them up? Am I dragging them? Like, how are my shoulders? And then try to bring that in a more refined way into the dance to try to create that same energy of like, this person's heavy, this person's tired. So like when I was doing my number for Belly Dance Stories, I was having that same thing of like, okay, starting down below, slowly getting up like a phoenix rising from the flames in a way, because the text had its progression too of like being innocent, like getting angry to being okay. So that same idea I had to go into my dance of like starting like rising from it. And in a way I wanted to have that same kind of progression, but it's starting from anger part versus innocent part. So like a phoenix rising from the flame. And I'm walking slowly leading into it. And I wanted to like my body language and my structure and how I hold myself has to be like that too. I have to be proud, because one of the most beautiful I think the most beautiful parts of so many of the Puerto Ricans that I know is how proud we are and how good we are. And I was like, that element has to be in it too. That liftedness has to be there. And then coming back down, if I come back down, but I'm still like having to be like this animalistic person in a way. Because then I was also thinking of the chupacabra, like in it too, like these nails, it's just being like crouching down and then rolling into the snake. But then also as the song progresses and it's changing into this new song of this idea of like, I'm fine. I'm kind of happy being like that. I'm kind of happy who I am in general, and just having that like holding yourself up still, but not being so tense about it, and then being more relaxed and having that like fluidity of being like proud and not in control at the same time. Because that was my whole thing, was dualities, being restrained but being unrestrained at the same time, being a woman, being evil, not being evil, being a warrior, being not being a warrior, being all these things, and how how both can exist at the same time. You don't have to be one or the other. We're always all things. And I bring that into my dance and into my dance practice in general. I'm a multifaceted person. I have my amazing qualities, and I also have my very ugly qualities, and how and they both can exist. And I don't necessarily have to hide them. I can bring them together and bring that to where I am being as authentic as I can to myself and to you. You're going to see my good side and my bad side, because as a human being, the human experience, that's what this is.
A lot of boldness and a lot of courage also to be able to tell your story in such a unique way. And going for that, what advice do you have for dancers today, Jesenia?
My biggest advice, and I try to tell every person that comes up to me asking for advice the same thing. I want them to know that to learn yourself, learn you, and to reach, I don't even think I'm fully there yet, but amazing artists out there, you have to do a lot of self-reflection, self-criticism, and like not be afraid of the dark parts of you, and also don't be afraid to be proud of the good parts of you and show them off. This idea of I have to be, when you're in the art world, when you're on stage, you could be humble off of stage. On stage, don't be humble. Be proud. Show all parts of you, and don't shy away from it. Be honest with yourself. And the moment you're honest with yourself, you can be honest with the audience.
So to kind of summarize a little bit, I have some words. I have embodiment, multifaceted, authenticity, sensuality, dualities, mythology, work in progress. I mean, this conversation was so dense and had so many layers that I feel very inspired.
Yay!
Me too. And I love that you also brought the element of culture in a very different way in the show, where I think a lot of our members that are listening and dancers can also learn about that process of deconstructing us also culturally, and the way, you know, our culture also informs a lot of how do we behave in this world today, and how do we choreograph ourselves. That I think it's a type of reflection that everybody has to do in their life. So I'm very grateful that you were able to brought that to the show in so many incredible ways, by the writing, the audio, the performance, and I love it's just like Alexandra says, very inspiring to hear all the amazing possibilities that we have for creating.
Thank you, Jesenia, for coming on to our podcast and telling us more about your performance. I think that we should have a photo shoot with your chair. I think you should make it.
Yes.
I think you should come back to Miami and we'll do a photo shoot at HGAB Studios. And we'll add it to our whole project.
Yes.
Jesenia, how can people reach you if they have any questions or comments?
Well, I only have one social media. This one, because I deleted all of them like 2 years ago. You can find me on Instagram and Instagram only at Jesenia Dance. That's JESENIA Dance.
Perfect. Well, thank you.
So you guys can see other amazing videos of her.
Also, I'm on YouTube. You can see videos on YouTube too.
Perfect. We'll tag you.
So much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on the Belly Dance Stories podcast. Ready to write your story with us? Send them to our email, bellydancestories@gmail.com.
Visit our website for the latest news about our production at bellydancestories.com. And remember that you can follow us on Instagram at bellydance_stories. And remember,
let your body speak loud and beautiful.